All right. Tonight, we're going to finish 17 and hopefully move on some. So please turn to Revelation chapter 17. Revelation 17, we're going to start with verse 12 tonight. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. They have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. They shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is the Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. He said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God had put in her hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and to give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Okay. Who are these 10 kings that it's talked about in verse 12? Anybody? I'll let you in on a secret. I don't know either. There's some people that try to explain these 10 kings as being the emperors of Rome. You got to really mess with the numbers and things to make that fit, and I'm not a big fan of that. I honestly have no clue who these 10 kings John's alluding to are, and since I don't know and don't feel confident, I'm not going to put forth my suggestion. There are many people out there that have worked out some theories to exactly who these are, and I have yet to find one that's convincing enough to me to make it sound real. So this is one of those mysteries that I don't understand, and, I don't know how you feel, but I know what happens in the end, so I'm not going to worry that much about this. Whoever these 10 are, look what happens with them. What's the first thing that they get? They get power. What do they do with this power? They give their power and strength unto the beast. They fight against the Lamb. What happens when you fight God? You lose. You come out second best. They don't know that until they fight against God. But after they fight against God, what do? Who do they fight after they fight God? What? Look in verse, they fight the whore. We talked about the whore last week. You ever hear that old Middle Eastern saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend? These 10 kings first wage war against God. And when they lose that battle, they turn against the whore. What is Matthew? Who has Matthew 12:30? Or Matt 2:12-30? I misspelled it on the paper. I'm sorry.
He that is not with me is against me, and he that gathereth not with me scattereth abroad.
Can God use what seems to be evil for his plan? Use Nebuchadnezzar. Exactly. Can God use the devil in his plan? I think there's a lesson to be learned here. These kings first fight against God and they lose. Then God allows them to fight against the whore, the incarnation, the devil. Think about that. Sometimes evil can fight evil. That's very true. How many times have you been suckered into something that looked good and seemed good, but once you get into it, when it turns bad, you turn against the person that brought you into it? You think maybe these 10 kings are going through something similar like that with the whore and the beast? They sell it, they buy into it in the beginning, and then realize that it's bad and wind up turning against them. So, how often do we realize only too late that we've been deceived and then turn on the one who leads us astray? It's interesting, though, to see what these 10 kings do to the whore. There's 2 punishments here. Who has Micah 3:3? Oogie, will you read that?
Shall also eat the flesh of my people and flay their skin from off them, and they break their bones and chop them in pieces, as for the pot and as flesh within the sickle of Sauron.
There are 2 specific punishments that the kings inflict upon the whore. They eat her flesh and they burn her with fire. These are some pretty hardcore punishments that are dealt out in the Old Testament. Eating someone's flesh is an abomination. Cannibalism is horrible. It is reserved only for the most heinous, or the most heinous of times. But there's one other verse in here that points to something. Who has Leviticus 20:14? Okay. He shall be burnt with fire if he commits this abomination. This is one of the few abominations in the Old Testament where you're supposed to be burned with fire. When you blaspheme against God, what's supposed to happen to you? You're supposed to be dragged out of the camp, and what happens? Well, you die. How do they kill you? Stoning you to death. This sexual abomination is one of the only times where it talks about being burned up with fire. There was one other time in the Old Testament where this was supposed to be done. Anybody know what it is? It's when the daughter of a Levite commits a sexual sin. She's supposed to be burned up with fire. Do you know what's important about that? Who were the Levites? They were the priests. They were the ones who were in charge of the worship of God. If any child in Israel knew what was supposed to be right and what God wanted them to do, who do you think child that would be? A Levite child, a child of the priest. So if a Levite's daughter committed an abomination, a sexual abomination against God, don't you think she would have known better? She would have to knowingly violate God's command to do something like that. And what is this harlot that John speaks of doing? Knowingly violating God and trying to get others to do the same. Hence, these 2 horrible punishments have been reserved for her. But moving on. I really want to get through this book before next year. If I say something y'all want to elaborate on it, please stop me. Chapter 18. After these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. He cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hole of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. The merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Yes, Jacob. It's what we call kind of a double standard. He would be killed, but he wouldn't be. If I remember my Old Testament law right, He would be killed, but he wouldn't be burnt with fire. When they caught the woman in adultery and brought her before Jesus, why did only the woman come forward? Last time I checked, to commit adultery, there had to be somebody else, yet only the woman. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're going to stop right now and have prayer for Brother Donald. Terrell, Job, correct me if I'm wrong on this. This is some pretty, if I remember correctly, and I might be mixing this up with something that's non-scriptural, but wasn't a woman slave valued at less than a male slave? Yeah. Women were not treated like they are today. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I said it before and I'll say it again. If it weren't for women, we wouldn't have a church. So, Katie? I'm just curious if that was a good offer or not. I don't know how much camels cost, but I've got to say that's probably still cheaper than the way we do it in America. All joking aside, one important side note. We need not let our modern day culture influence the way we view biblical times. There's a lot of things that happened when this was written, and there was a lot of things that happened when the Old Testament that were written that are vastly different than the way we do things now. Don't ever discount what's in here because of what we know, what we do today. So, right. Yeah. Oh, and on a side note, I'm actually going to do something I don't do too much. I will denounce a couple of Bible versions. There are a couple of versions of the Bible that change Scripture to be more gender inclusive, and I hereby officially denounce those Bible versions. So while we're on the subject, shouldn't change this because times change. Times are always going to change. This doesn't. The one that pops readily to mind is the TNIV. TNIV, today's New International Version. Yeah, that one. Beak. English Standard, if I remember correctly, is more concerned with using a simpler base of words. And what I mean by that is there's some versions of the Bible that, okay. Anybody in here read Green Eggs and Ham, Dr. Seuss? I love that book. You know that Dr. Seuss was challenged to write that book with a bet? Somebody bet Dr. Seuss that he couldn't write a book using just this list of 50 words. And he did. It's Cat in the Hat. It's either Cat in the Hat or Green Eggs and Ham. One of those two. They're both good books. The CEV, some of the modern translations, when they translate the Bible, they'll use a smaller list of words, and the entire Bible will be only from a list of 800 words. And they do that so that people who do not understand or do not read or do not comprehend well will be able to read the Bible. But there are versions out there that are specifically translated with a theological idea behind them. So avoid those. And if you have questions, feel free to call me. We'll talk about it. We're not going to devolve into a Bible discussion, translation discussion tonight. We'll chat about that later. Speaking of green eggs and ham and the cat in the hat, how many of you like poetry? Sweet. Do you realize that chapter 18, the first part of this here is a poem? Doesn't rhyme, does it? They should. I'm sorry, I'm a man. If I look at a bunch of words and they're like, oh, that's poetry, I'm like, how is that different than the back of a toilet paper box? I'm sorry. What we have here is called a doom song. We see this throughout the Scriptures. Scriptures that begin with a song of doom for a specific city. Does someone have Isaiah chapter 13? Will you read those couple verses for us, Steve?
In Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It shall never be inhabited, neither shall be dwelt in from generation to generation. Neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their abode there. The wild beasts of the desert shall lie there, and their houses shall be full of doleful creatures. And the owl shall dwell there, and the satyr shall dance there. And the wild beasts of the islands shall cry in their desolate houses, and dragons in their pleasant palaces. And her time is near to come, and her days shall not be prolonged.
Wild beasts will live there. Satyrs will live there. Does this sound good for this city? No. This is poetry in some of its rawest form. But the message still comes across, doesn't it? Woe. Woe to this city, because this city is about to be destroyed and made desolate by God and by God Himself. This not only happens in Revelations. Steve read from Isaiah. There's another example. We're not going to read all these. Another example in Isaiah 34. There's two examples in Jeremiah chapter 50 and in chapter 51 and in Zephaniah 2. The writers of Scripture are giving a warning to the city. Desolation is coming. Let's take a minute and look at these verses pretty in depth so we can see exactly what this is like. Look at verse 1. The angel came down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. Has anybody put out their nativity scene yet? I've had mine up for like 2 weeks. Just my indoor one. And when I say just my indoor one, just the indoor one that you see right as you come in. The outdoor one still has to go up, and I'll be honest, there might even be more. I don't know at this point. When you look at pictures of angels, what do you see? Long hair, wings, halos. You ever see pictures of Jesus with a halo? You ever see pictures of Moses with a halo? I've seen some old ones. Why do you think we see all these pictures of angels with halos? They're what? Celestial. The light around them? Show holiness? Authority? Those are all good answers, but I don't think they're right. What did Moses look like when he came down from the mountain after speaking with God? He had to cover it with a cloth that was so bright. when you come from the presence of God, you're different. Moses, after speaking to God, shone so brightly the Israelites could not even look on him. These halos that we see on angels, we've been trained to think that that shows that, they're celestial beings. We've been trained to show that they're from heaven. It's got nothing to do with the angels. It is a reflection of God's glory. An angel is a messenger of God. A messenger waits at the feet of the power that he serves, ready and willing to do his master's bidding. An angel that leaves the foot of God in heaven and comes to earth is going to have that glow of God around him. Look at how powerful this glow is that John talks about in verse 1 here. How powerful was it? The whole earth was lit up. Just a little aside here. This doesn't go just for angels or Moses. If you are truly in step with God, people can tell, can't they? You may not glow like a light bulb, but you will still radiate the presence of God. The closer you are to Him and the more in step you are with Him, the more people will know that you're something special. We'll come back to that word special in a little bit. Babylon has fallen. Babylon the Great is fallen, and become the habitation of devils, and the hole of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Any of y'all ever see those commercials for those ghost hunters or things like that? You see that on the TV, people walk around with video cameras going to these haunted places looking for ghosts. You think they ever found a real ghost? Well, I don't know if that would be that bad, but if you ever see a real ghost, it's going to be bad. I don't think ghosts exist the way we know them. I don't think they're things running around in bed sheets waiting to scare us. And unfortunately, I don't think there's any ghosts like Slimer from the Ghostbusters rolling around. But I will tell you that evil spirits roam this earth. Why do you think Babylon has become the habitation of devils? It's a bad place. Why do you think these devils are here or there in Babylon? You think they're welcome there? Okay. Yeah. I mean, C.S. Lewis once said that spirits go back to the place they long the most for. Maybe these evil spirits are roaming around Babylon, like you said, Joe, because they feel welcome there. Maybe because that's where they sought what they wanted. Those that were cursed in life by looking for the wrong thing spend all of the afterlife still cursed, roaming around looking for the wrong thing. How much of a hell would that be for those that are cursed? To spend eternity looking for something other than God. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What reference? That's in Turkmenistan. Actually, there's several gates of hell scattered throughout the world. The Turkmenistan one is a natural gas deposit that's been burning since 1976. I just saw this the other day. I'm not that much of a nerd, okay? There are several places that some of them are active volcanoes, some of them are burning pits of fire. I think there's another one in Iran that's a pit of natural gas that's been burning for like 2,000 years. They're referred to as the gates of hell, just because they're very intimidating and stuff. You ever seen video of the inside of a volcano? Kind of matches what we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks when, lake of fire. Yeah, I can go off on this tangent. Our version of hell comes from this book, comes from Revelation. Up until the time of Jesus, the Jews believed in a place called Sheol, which was neither truly heaven nor hell. It was a place where the souls roamed around. The place where the bodies were thrown, I think, was called Gehenna. Yeah. It was not necessarily the idea of hell that we have as an eternal punishment. It was an eternal nothingness. Your soul just roamed without purpose, without anything. It was kind of a gray area. John's revelation and the few messages that Jesus preached about hell give us a completely different thing about heaven being a wonderful place and hell being a place of suffering and torment. So we're going to actually get into that. Probably, I think it's 19 when we get into that. 19 or, no, it's 20, I'm sorry. So, all right. Well, I got sidetracked from my tangent, so I must not have needed to go off on that tangent. These ghosts are reliving their failures. Spending eternity reliving your failures. Hell on earth. One interesting thing, when John speaks and gives us this poem of doom, he's speaking as if Babylon has already been destroyed. Has Babylon been destroyed yet? No, the end of times hasn't happened yet, but he's speaking of it so authoritatively and so clearly that he clearly believes it's going to happen. So, verses 4 and 5. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sin, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Get out. God calls his people in time of distress. Who has Genesis 12:1? God's telling Abraham to get out. All right? I'll get you in a second, Jacob. Who has Jeremiah 51:6? Miss Linda? Kind of dovetails right nicely with what we're reading about here in Revelations, doesn't it? Get out of Babylon. All right, one more, then I'll come to you, Jacob. 1 Timothy 5:22. God is calling us to be pure. Okay, Jacob, what was your question? Comment. No. To see ghosts is to see confirmation of a lot of stuff that's spoken about in the Bible. And the devil's not going to let that happen. Most of the ghosts you'll never see, but they're still out there working. To see a ghost, to see a real live ghost is confirmation. And the last thing the devil wants is for there to be concrete proof that God is what he is and what he says is real. And to actually see something like that would be pretty concrete proof to a lot of people. And that's the last thing the devil wants. Does that make sense? So, you're probably not going to see ghosts like you do in the Christmas Carol or, stuff like that. I will not stand in this pulpit and tell you that you will go your entire life and not see a demon. Sometimes it happens, okay? It's not a common occurrence. But I will tell you this, Satan is crafty and he will use about every trick you can imagine. So just be on the lookout. Okay. Get out. Get away. Don't be caught up with their sins. This brings us to the most common word in the New Testament when it talks about what we Christians are supposed to be. Anybody want to guess what it is? Most common word describing what a Christian is supposed to be like. Obedient or faithful? Christ-like? Be holy? Good, but that's not it. Anybody else? Steadfast? Another good one. Pure? Nope, not it. Different. The exact Greek word is hagios. It means separate. It means different. We are supposed to be a people that are different from all others. Who has Romans 12:2? Portia? Do not be conformed to this world. Be transformed. Kind of goes along with what I said earlier about the Bible translations, changing the translations to fit the ways of the world, doesn't it? Christians are called to live in the world, but not be of the world. That is a huge distinction there. We are called to be witnesses. We are called to be in this world, but we are not called to be of this world. We have to be strong enough to stand for what we believe and stand for what we know is right, even if the world is against us. You are supposed to be the one who changes the world, not the one that is changed by the world. God's calling the people who are left in Babylon. Get out. Don't be caught up in their sins. It is not yet time for us to be called out. It is not yet time for us to be gathered up. It is time for us to live in this world and to not conform to it, but to preach and to try to save others. To be different. To be hagios. Remember that word. Verse 6. Reward her even as she has rewarded you, and double unto her, double according to her works, in the cup which she hath filled full to her double. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. Who is God talking to here? The people? Why is God saying this to the people? What's that? He's warning them. What is God warning them about? Anybody else? What is God warning here? Whatever you do, you'll be paid back twice. Yeah, we're going to come to that. You pulled a Joe. You're jumping ahead. Is God talking to men or to angels here? I believe he's talking to people. I believe that God is reminding people about something. You know what that is? Who does retribution belong to? Who does judgment belong to? How often do we forget that? How often do we judge and wish retribution on someone or something? God is reminding people that even though this person, this Babylon, is so bad, they may be tempted to cast judgment on her. They may be tempted to do something to her. But divine judgment belongs to God and in His time. Because no matter how righteous we are still human and we are fallible. God is going to take care of things. Well, they do that so they can pray to God for those people. Apparently, they didn't get the message that Jesus has a direct line and not a third-party stuff. God and God alone. I think this message really jumps 2,000 years to us today. If we believe in God, we need to trust Him as well. If we believe what this book says, we need to trust that God will take care of those who hurt us. Did Jesus tell us to get even with our enemies? Love them. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. We Christians can never be the avenging force of God. I'm a firm believer that sometimes Jesus was walking and talking to the disciples, and the disciples would say something, and Jesus would be like, I'm going off in the woods to pray for a little bit. Translation, Jesus was just a little, I need to step away for a minute. We should take the same hint. Like I said, we are called to be, what's the Greek word? Hagios. Different from the world. Who has Matthew 7:2? So if we fallible creatures judge someone else, what judgment awaits us? The same. I have never served on a jury. I've been called for jury duty sometimes. Whenever they question me, I say, fry them. Like, sir, it's only for a traffic ticket. I don't care. They need the death penalty. Usually gets me off jury duty. I didn't want to serve on a jury duty. Thank God I've never had to judge someone. Because as good as their lawyer may be, or as good as the opposition's lawyer may be, They will not give me the whole story. They will give me the story they want me to know. We will never know the whole story. Only God. Judgment belongs to God. Now, Lee, you alluded to it a little bit earlier. You reap what you sow. If you fight against God, guess what? God's going to fight against you as well. Who has Exodus 22? So how much is the payment? Double. Reward her even as she has rewarded you, and double unto her, double according to her works. This person has fought against God and has sought to lead others away from God. She has condemned, and for lack of a better word, because I don't know of a more appropriate word, she has damned countless souls. Now God says, pay her back. How much? Double unto her. Double. So is this just a regular double or a double-double? It's like the ice cream I get when I go to the ice cream shop. It's a double-double. The wrath of God is fierce. The wages of sin is fierce. Whole sermon in that. I'll save that for later. Verse 7. How much she has glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. This verse deals with pride. How much downfall has been caused by pride? All. What? Not yet. Living like you can take care of yourself and be great by being on your own. What happens to people who believe they can live their entire lives all on their own? They fall flat on their face. They can't do it. Yeah, they already had their reward. Pain and frustrations await those who believe this. To believe that you are strong enough to face anything, to believe that you are all that you need, that is a damning belief. To those who are so prideful that they think nothing can hurt them, God has other plans. Isaiah, what? Okay. It will. Who has Isaiah 3:16-17? Joe? So, girls who think you're all that, God's going to strike you with dandruff. Think about that, though. Guys, an attractive girl comes up to you and says, "Hey, babe, what's going on?" And she's smoking hot, and you look at her, and then all of a sudden you see she's got the white shoulders and dandruff all over. You can ask for a number, and you can be like, I gotta go. Gotta go. People who take pride in themselves are going to be humbled. Look at what God does to the haughty.